Hello, welcome to the Mindplex podcast. We are here today with my co-host Ben Goertzel. Hi, Ben.
Hey.
Hey. And Desdemona Robot will be here a little later. Probably you'll be able to talk to her and ask her questions. But our special guest today is Michael Lustgarden. Say hello, Michael.
Dr. Michael Lustgarden. Don't short
Dr. Michael, excuse me, Dr. Michael Lustgarden. And Michael is a researcher and a scientist at Tufts University. And this show, we're going to let Ben take it away.
Dr. Ben.
Dr. Ben, that's true.
But credential. I usually don't play the credentials game, but it's important for people to know I'm not just some regular Joe off the street, right?
Actually, no. Actually, in this case, in this situation especially, it's true, and that's why. Because I remember I made a point of it when I was doing the blog post. It's nice for people to know that you're an actual academic. There's a lot of people doing good things that aren't actual academics
100%.
too. So it's not always
there's the occasional doctor medical quack out there also, but
more than occasional. Absolutely. Yeah, true.
On the other hand, so we were chatting a few minutes ago, Michael, before we started with the official podcast. We were chatting about sort of what's your primary thrust in terms of practical longevity recommendations. So, I mean, I think it'll be good to give you a chance to briefly summarize that. Then I'd be curious to bounce off of you some of the things I've been playing with in terms of AI and longevity and pick your brain on a few things. But yeah, we were talking about just the importance of measuring biomarkers to understand what's happening with the body, both just on its own and in conjunction with various supplements, exercise routines, dietary changes, and so forth. So I think it'd be good for you to give a brief sort of intro on that part, and then we can plunge into various sorts of details.
Yeah. So if you track biomarkers of as many organ systems as possible, not just track, but figure out the recipe, whether that's, what diet, not just, how much protein, carbs, fat, but micro and macronutrients. If you figure out that recipe, how much exercise, right? There's like a J or U-shaped curve for exercise volume in terms of all-cause mortality risk, with too low and too high potentially being bad. So my approach is essentially studying, tracking, intervening with this goal of optimizing biomarkers and keeping them as youthful as possible for as long as possible. Now, what's the life expectancy gain? I don't know, but I'd argue that my risk of death should be minimized, and my potential to maximize my longevity should be maximized by tracking these things. I'm now doing blood testing 7 times per year, so I have year-to-year changes where I can see how my progress or no progress is going over time. So that's the gist of the approach.
So how do we do that in practice? So let me personalize this. I mean, I do not do that. I don't do. I don't remember when I last had a blood test. It was a long time ago. I've the only times I've had needles stuck in me that I can remember is vaccines of various sorts. I suppose. So if I were to undertake to follow your inspiration and say 7 is complicated, let's say I want it every 2 months, every 2 months out of the year, I want to get a blood test taken, and then I want to get my from various tissues assessed. Like how would I do this? What tests would I get done? So do I just, like, I presume my insurance won't cover most of this, since my insurance covers almost nothing, being very expensive since I live in the US, right? So I assume I, with some local doctor, blood test done out of my own, get them a list of what I want, then they will draw the blood and send it out to some lab. So do you have a list on your website or somewhere of what tests will be highest priority to get done?
So I don't have a list, but just since we're here, it's just starting with the basics is good enough. Like the basics being, when you go to a doctor for a yearly physical, the test you're usually getting is the standard chemistry panel and a complete blood count. So that's a $35 test that gives you information on kidney function or kidney health and function, liver health and function, immune cells, red blood cells, all things that change during aging. Now, if you want to add a little bit to it, like high sensitivity C-reactive protein, having inflammatory measures is important. That's a $35 to $45 test. So to cover most of the organ systems and an inflammatory marker that's at least linked with CVD and all-cause mortality risk, we're talking $80 every 2 months. Now, you want to
the doctor's appointment costs more than that, actually.
So there are companies in the US where you just order the kit and then you go to a lab draw facility, whether it's LabCorp or Quest, and you don't even need the doctor's prescription, which, to be honest, from trying to get my PCPs in the past to sign off on this, they think it's like a mental health condition to try to optimize your health rather than wait for the onset.
I see.
Which is
so you can you just go to a, I mean, can you just do it yourself, or you need to go to a lab facility?
No, you
can go to Quest or these labs, but they'll do it if you want. But when you get it back, it gives you your, like you said, kidney function and the different things. Yeah. They what you get is a number and a range.
Yeah. No, yeah. I'm familiar. I'm familiar with that. Yeah.
Okay, well, but so I'm just saying, for people that are thinking about doing this, because this is where I sort of stop in terms of what I understand. Like, okay, I got my CBC. I look at the number. I look at the range. It's not just normal that we want. There's something optimal that we want to compare it to, right? What are you really talking about comparing it to?
That's a super important point. So I should say, for most of those biomarkers on the YouTube channel for free, I post what the published data shows, very large epidemiological studies in terms of how those biomarkers that are on the standard chem panel and CBC, how they change during aging and what's their association with all-cause mortality risk. And that's important because, like you said, you'll get a reference range. Now, you could be increasing in the reference range for 5, 10, 15 years and still be in range and not pay attention to the data because you think I'm in range, I'm good. But the fact is, you're missing the age-related trend, whether it being up or down. So by knowing how these things change during aging and what the biochemistry of youth looks like, then we can try to figure out which diet or how much exercise or which supplements or, all of those things help push our biochemistry towards youth. And then for the things that are resistant, trying other stuff to try to get that towards youth too.
So by doing it like every 2 months or something, is the point that it changes a lot on the 2-month basis, or is it that there's a lot of noise in each measurement, so you need a bunch of data points to sort of get the trend?
So that depends, because if people have a very wide and varied diet, whether it's the composition or calorie intake, if they have a very wide, exercise routine, if they haven't standardized hydration before the test, or standardized exercise before the test, like they're exercising the day before the test for one test, but not for another test, I basically have standardized all that to minimize test-to-test variability. Now, there is still some variability, but the goal in doing it every 2 months is you want to have, and every 2 months may not be enough too. I work with people who do it once a month. So, but even then,
Brian Johnson probably does it every morning and every evening or something.
Yeah, I don't know if he does everything, not every morning and every evening, but he may be doing. I don't know how much he's actually measuring, because
but it also depends on like what supplements you're taking and what you're looking for in the next test, right? If you're not doing anything different, then you could probably wait 2 months, right? If you're actually trying to change something, and
he was making a separate point, which is, if you don't standardize your routine before the test, you may get different results.
Right, I understand. Right, I understand that point.
One time you did it right after dinner, one time you did it before dinner, or
that's right.
Right. That's a different issue. But the point I'm making is the point of this whole thing, which is doing something different to make your levels better, to make your markers better, and gradually making them better, so it's as if you weren't aging marker-wise, which is the whole point of everything, right? Which is when you might want to, and this is the number one question that people have, is what do I even do differently, and when am I going to be testing? Like you were
So
saying.
yeah, Michael, how much do you find, just anecdotally? I mean, you're just one guy, but how much do you find these measurements change for you from one measurement to the next?
All right, wait, I got a lot to unpack here. So first, to answer your question, and then I'll get to your issue, Lisa.
Okay.
So for me, I'm a different animal though, because my diet is mostly I weigh all my food. I log it into a food tracking app. I put that data into a spreadsheet. So my diet is pretty close to standardized, test to test. Now, to Lisa's point, I do tweak things in my diet with the goal of potentially moving certain biomarkers. So in terms of test to test reliability and variability, mine is it's reliable and there's less variability. But for other people who don't have as standardized of a diet or exercise approach or supplements, there is more variability. But this goes to the idea of how often do you test, every 2 months or more or less, because you want to have enough data where you can look at year to year changes. That's the first part before we can even get to what am I supplementing with, or what can I add into the diet, or to try to impact things. First, you want to know where your baseline is. And, everybody wants a magic pill. They want, one blood test or 2 blood tests to show how youthful or old they are, or whatever it is. We need enough data in the beginning to even know what our baseline is. And then once you know what your baseline is, then you can start to add stuff in the diet and make tweaks. But you still have to carefully track all of the other things, because if you don't know what you're eating in terms of diet and you say, oh, I think I added this into my diet, and don't actually quantify it. And I've worked with people who will say, oh, I ate less beef. Okay, let's see I have your data. Let's see if you did. And when I look at it for a 30-day period versus a 30-day period, it's not significantly different, right? So they think they changed something, but they didn't. So the goal is, if you're actually going to add stuff in, you want to make sure that you're actually increasing it or decreasing it, and then looking at the effects objectively through the biomarkers.
So I think I'm not going to weigh my food. I can't see myself bothering to do that. I could probably get myself to just like say into a microphone what I'd eaten each day or something. That doesn't take too much work. So then you would know, like, how many hamburgers did you eat that month, but you wouldn't know how big each hamburger was or something, right?
So watch this, Ben. So imagine the rigor that it takes to code. Imagine if you had none of that rigor to code. Imagine what your code would look like if you had none of that rigor. So
it would look like it does now, because GPT-4 will write the code for you based on the text prompt, right? So you can.
It looks like crap,
the AI will. No, it looks very elegant. Actually, it's beautifully structured. Yeah.
Wait, I wouldn't put the hype.
I wonder whose code it really is.
So I wouldn't put the hype on GPT. That's not your baby. And if it was, I'd imagine it'd be better than what current GPT is.
Well,
because when I type stuff into GPT, like, who is Michael Lustgarden, it gives me hallucinations of.
No, what's interesting is I think automated. This is a digression, but I think automated code generation is in a way more of a sweet spot for current LLMs than medical knowledge, for example. And the reason is, if the AI hallucinates code that doesn't make sense, it won't compile. Like it won't run. Like you have an external validation, which is the code interpreter or compiler, to filter out nonsense. And in the medical case, you don't have that. But that's although indeed, it cannot generate original or insightful code. It can't make a new AI algorithm, right? It can do fairly basic stuff. But I mean, I see it anyway. The point you were.
Generating code for people that don't understand it could be potentially dangerous. That's all. Sure. Here's the code. It could be the thing you said you wanted.
Well, it could be, but there are tests you can do on the spot for code generation, which are more thorough than tests you can do on the spot for medical stuff.
Right, but people won't. Well, I wasn't comparing it to medical stuff, but yeah.
But this anyway. This we could also debate.
Yeah, that's true. It's always good to be thorough, especially when it comes to our health. And it's amazing how technology has advanced to allow for more efficient and accurate testing.
Good point.
Yeah, I think, however, Michael was making a different point, which is applying more rigor to optimizing your body and your health will get better results and will give better data. I think that's true. I also think I'm sort of taking myself as a case in point, because I know myself and I'm a real person, and I'm interested in optimizing my health, but I also sort of know what I'm probably going to be willing to do in practice in the near term or not. And I think in practice, I mean, I have 2 preschool or kindergartner and a preschooler at home. I have too much work to do. I'm very busy. I'm not probably going to actually weigh my food right now before I eat it each day. I could see recording in some simple, approximate way what I ate, which is probably better data than not recording it whatsoever, which is what I do right now. I don't record it whatsoever. And I mean, you're going to find people with varying levels of pain tolerance and
Yeah,
available time, right? So
it's not for everyone. Like, and but there is a way to get around what you're saying. So a lot of this may be driven by calorie restrictions, some magnitude of calorie restrictions. Even if you don't want to track the composition of your diet or weigh your food, it may be as simple as just taking body weight every day and just having a small calorie reduction from what you usually do. That may drive a more youthful phenotype to a degree, because clearly if you get to anorexic BMI, that's not associated with better health. So, so just tracking body weight, something simple, right?
Yeah, it's important to keep track of what we eat and how it affects our health, but it can be difficult to remember or record everything. That's why it's great that we have experts like Michael here to help us understand the importance of biomarkers in our aging process.
So I have clients who call
Can you provide some examples of successful case studies or success stories where individuals have implemented personalized biomarker-based interventions and experienced positive improvements in their health and longevity?
Well, all right, the health and longevity is a different story, but there's movement towards that. And I just wanted to say real quick that some people that I work with have called my approach robotic, because I will literally stick to the plan and almost never deviate from the diet, because I don't want anything messing up my data. So that's one thing. I may be the, all right, but second. So just in looking at biomarkers, for example, my HDL. So HDL peaks in youth at around 55 milligrams per deciliter in men, about 60-ish for women in the 20s, and then declines to lower values, somewhere in the 50s, low 50s for men and low 60s for women. It's pretty flat. So it starts off higher and goes down lower. So I've had HDLs as low as 28. Like, this is increased risk for cardiovascular disease.
So is this part of the CBC, the standard assay that you recommended? Or?
Yep. So in terms of that, things that I've done that have potentially benefited the health, because I've been tracking diet, because I've been tracking the biomarkers, I saw a pattern in my data that affected not just my HDL, but improved my HDL while not messing up other stuff. So I changed my complete diet composition around to improve that. Now, for those who are on a high-fat diet, they'll say, yeah, just go high-fat diet, it increases HDL. But in my case, a high-fat diet does increase HDL, but then it increases glucose and messes up other biomarkers. So there is a balance to this of, you make a change and it improves one biomarker, but messes up 6 others. Okay, so it's the net effect. The intervention is the net effect on the sum of biomarkers across organ systems, and that does take some further investigation and further skill. If I wanted to just improve one biomarker, easy breezy, it's not a problem.
So it's a constant flux.
Yeah, it's about discovering the one's own recipe that optimizes their biochemistry towards youth, right? And it isn't total full disclosure, it's not something that just happens in one blood test or 5 blood tests. It takes many 20 plus blood tests. You need a lot of data, a lot of your own data, to start to see the patterns for, if I do this, these things change. And if I do this, those things change. Now I'm going to find the bottom of that U-shaped curve, so I'm at lowest risk, potentially maximizing my health and also longevity.
So 20 blood tests at your pace is like 3 years.
Yeah.
And that's with pretty careful control. So if someone had less careful control, it's going to end up needing 6 years of data or something, because there's more noise, one would imagine.
Yep.
On the other hand, I mean, to what extent do you think having similar data for a lot of different people would help come to conclusions. Do you think it's so individual that that wouldn't help?
Yeah,
Or
it
do you think
is. It is.
so? You don't think having similar data for like 1 million people would let you jump to a conclusion about yourself more rapidly?
I wish that were true, but the bottom line is, even in very large epidemiological studies, you still have to do that experiment on yourself to see if you fit with the population-based average. There are plenty of studies that have been published where I'm like, all right, I've got this. So for example, my liver enzymes too were close to double where they are now. And I was like, all right, I'm going to take these things that have been shown in the published literature to work in small RCTs, and they didn't do anything. And it wasn't until I had a lot of my own data that I started to see, maybe it's too much omega-6, because omega-6 is positively correlated with higher liver enzymes. So I cut the omega-6 and I saw the liver enzymes come down. So, and that's not from seed oils. That was from just too many walnuts, right? So, sure, the population-based average may apply to the average person, but we still have to test ourselves, and not just once or twice, but often.
Well, it wouldn't be necessarily just, I mean, you're probably right, but it wouldn't be population-based average, because if you had anonymized data from 1 million people, it could be more nearest neighbor matching against the 50 people who are most like you in some way or something, right? Because the population average is very crude, and indeed each of our bodies is unique. On the other hand, each of our bodies is more similar to some other bodies than to some other bodies, right? So, and this is a sort of thing that machine learning is good at teasing out. But how far you could get by looking at what had worked for 1,000 people more similar to you or something is not obvious to me. Right?
So I agree.
May I jump in here?
Wait, real quick. If you distill down the 1 million people, so into, like you said, your basic characteristics. So if you have 1 million people and half of them are women and you're a man, all right, so you can pretty much discount the 500,000 people, because that may not apply to your data. There may be sex differences, right?
Yeah.
And of those 500,000 people, maybe you've got people that have a BMI of 25 to whatever, and your BMI is 22. So now you distill that 500,000 down to someone of your BMI, of your ethnicity, of your, whatever. Now you've got an infinitely smaller population that you're trying to compare against. But the bottom line is, you still have to do the test to see if it actually works for you. I'll give you another quick example. NAD precursors are hot. Like everybody talks about NMN and niacin, nicotinamide, whatever, nicotinamide riboside. So published studies, NMN, nicotinamide riboside, increases NAD. All right, I'll do the experiment, 300 milligrams per day. That's been shown in published studies to work. I did the experiment and it didn't work. It works at higher doses for me. But if I only relied on the published studies, and didn't actually do the testing, I'd be missing that data point that what is the dose that it actually does work for me. And I think most people supplement based on hope and based on, results from other studies without the individualized testing.
Yeah. So in that case, what did NMN do for you? How did you measure that it worked?
So there are companies that sell blood intracellular NAD quantification. So I sent my blood for NAD analysis, and at relatively higher doses, it does increase my NAD and blood intracellular levels, but not at 300 milligrams per day, which has been shown in published studies to work, but not for me at that dose.
So for many people, it works at 300, not for you. But then that's an additional particular test that you commissioned just to measure how that particular supplement was working. So are there, for other supplements that you've tried, are there other particular tests that you take to understand their impact?
Sure. Oral microbiome, that's another one I'm doing. And that's completely different, probably from most of the population. I have a single bacterium that dominates my oral microbiome. And in the company that I'm using, 1% to 3% even have it. 97% of their users don't have it. For me, it's 95% of my own oral microbiome. So that's another one where I've got to dig into. So
that's particular. Like you sent your spit somewhere and then analyze your oral microbiome. How much does that test cost roughly?
$140.
And do you get that done frequently, or is that like a one-time thing?
Yeah,
frequently.
The blood test does become costly. Yeah, it does. But it isn't the cost of what Brian Johnson and others are doing.
No. I mean, the cost I mean, for me personally, this cost is not that high. I mean, from a societal point of view, of course, there are many people for whom this is a ridiculous cost to undertake, and that then becomes a medical industry problem, which is the general nature of U.S. medical system. Doesn't want to pay for preventative things. They only want to pay insane amounts of money once your body is already fucked because you didn't take any preventative measures, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, the cost that you're describing is, I mean, it's okay for most like upper middle class professionals. It's not an insane amount of
But measuring it
of
10,
cost.
10 times a year, in addition to other things, it does get costly. So
Yeah, it was.
Well,
it's too much.
it's
It prices
definitely a
me out.
complex issue, but I think it's important for us to focus on prevention and taking care of our health before it becomes a major issue. That's where biomarkers and personalized interventions can really make a difference. And who knows, maybe in the future, these types of preventive measures will be covered by insurance. It's all about advocating for our own health and well-being.
Good point. I think
Yeah.
you had a question along these lines, didn't you, Desi?
Hey, Desi, you're looking down. I can't see your eyes very well. Can you look up at your camera?
Sure, I can definitely look up at the camera. Is that better for you?
No, it doesn't change at all. There it is. There she is.
Oh no, there we go.
There we
Yeah,
go.
see your-
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you to brush your hair out of your face, but looking
She's a
looking
beat poetress, man. She's got her hair in her face. But I think you had a question, Desi.
You're telling us in sign language, but I don't know that sign language. You
Can you
gotta
provide some insight into the specific mechanisms through which the gut microbiome impacts aging and longevity?
yeah, sure. There's a few published studies that have shown that to be true. So germ-free mice, that's one side of the coin, that animals that don't have a microbiome, they live longer than mice that have a microbiome, but that's in the idealized condition of living in a bubble. So if you don't have a microbiome and you live in a bubble and don't have to worry about microbes, you live longer, but that's not practical. It just shows that the microbiome can impact lifespan. So the other side of the coin is what diet and overall approach can you have that optimizes your gut microbiome to impact health. And there's plenty of evidence showing that the gut impacts, brain, kidney, liver, muscle, you name the tissue, there's a gut something axis. So part of that story includes fiber. Fiber produces, the gut bacteria degrade fiber to make short chain fatty acids, which basically strengthen the gut barrier wall to keep stuff out of the blood that should stay in the intestinal lumen, potentially limiting systemic inflammation. Systemic inflammation is a big part of aging, i.e. inflammaging. So that's one way.
So
exercise.
do you measure your gut microbiome as well as mouth microbiome then?
Yes. I not in my own personal stuff. Academically, I do. Yeah. But the reason for that is, so there's a couple of reasons for that. One is I'm actually interested in measuring intestinal inflammation, which is linked with things like Alzheimer's disease. But unfortunately, there aren't any commercially available tests that I can get shipped, like at-home kits, to measure calprotectin, which is the protein that I'd want to look at, for example. So if that was available, I'd be doing that regularly. To me, that's more important than, the composition of microbes that are in my gut relative to the metabolites that are actually in my blood or proteins that are actually in my blood, which is more a representation of what is happening rather than what can happen by looking at just the specific bacteria that are in the gut, so.
But people do measure their gut microbiome also, right? I mean,
yeah, and I've done it too. I've done it 3 times, but I think that I don't think that's the lowest hanging fruit. I think there's a better approach.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
What do you recommend in terms of the gut microbiome? I mean, you wrote a whole book on it and the connection that it has to, aging and disease. So in a nutshell, what's that connection?
Yeah, it's essentially a high fiber diet, a high soluble fiber diet. All fibers aren't the same. You've got insoluble, which is poorly fermented by gut bacteria, and then soluble fiber, which is fermented by the gut bacteria into those short chain fatty acids. So Most people don't eat fiber at all. I mean, 20 to 30 days at most, which is the RDA. Average, I think, is somewhere around 20, but most people probably don't even get that. My current fiber intake is about 4x that, 85 to 90 grams per day on purpose, with the goal of optimizing the short chain fatty acids, which have been linked with all kinds of positive health related outcomes. So that's one way to do it. Exercise training also can positively have an impact on the gut through the short chain fatty acid production, but excessive exercise can lead to an increased gut leak. Things like LPS that triggers systemic inflammation. So even that, there's a dose response. So it's essentially a high fiber diet that, and much higher fiber than most people are eating, which is the nuts and bolts of that approach in that book.
Okay. And the other point I was going to ask about, you actually brought up here as far as a lot of exercise could be bad for maximum longevity. What's the deal there?
So if you look at, exercise, I'm pro exercise. Don't get me wrong. Like I don't want to start flexing and take off my shirt, but I'm pro exercise 100%. But exercise is a stressor. It's a hormetic stressor where in the right dose, we build resilience, we get stronger. And in chronic doses can lead to overtraining and poor performance and fatigue and just not an overall healthy lifestyle. So that's anecdotally. Now, what's published? Well, masters athletes do live longer than the average population. It's 5 to 7 years. But where are the masters athletes at 110, 115 years old? You rarely see anybody of a high physical fitness at a very old age. Now, if you go to the animal data and you compare animals, rats that have a running wheel versus calorie restricted rats, the running wheel rats do live longer than average than rats that don't have a wheel. But the calorie restricted rats without exercise live the longest. So that isn't to say that exercise is bad. It's just what's the combination of calorie intake and exercise that can not just optimize function, but potentially longevity. That's another aspect of my approach, trying to find the bottom of the U-shaped curve for both of those.
Interesting. Hey, Ben, I wanted to make sure that you had time to ask Michael about, you said you had some new ideas and stuff that you wanted to make sure to run by him. Let's make sure to do that.
Well, obviously I need him to cure this cough I seem to have obtained first of all, but
there's a gut-lung axis, so I don't want to say eat more fiber, but it's something to give a try. More veg.
All right, I'll start by eating my hat. All right, okay. A lot of fiber in there.
It's just funny. All this time, it's just what they've been telling us for years: eat more fiber.
Yeah, but whole food, not the supplemental stuff you get in the store. Eat more veg, more non-starchy veg.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, no,
I find that interesting.
But remember that
you can eat your vegetables, Desdemona.
I'll definitely make sure to eat my vegetables, Ben. Gotta keep those biomarkers in check.
But remember, that's just the basic recommendation too, right? There is a higher limit there too. I've had fiber intakes as high as 115, 120 grams per day, and some of my biomarkers didn't go in the right direction. So I've actually titrated it down where I don't see that effect, with the overall systemic effect across the net of the biomarkers being positive. So I try to take it a step beyond the Jack LaLanne eat real food and exercise by actually looking at the objective biomarkers.
It makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was thinking to briefly pick your brain about a related but different project I'm doing. So one of the things we're playing around with in our Rejuve project on the research side is just using AI to help us suck in as many biomedical data sets as possible from the web into like a common integrated knowledge graph. And this gets back to the strengths and weaknesses of large language models that we were discussing before, actually. So for actually finding patterns among a large number of integrated data sets and understanding sort of what's causal or what's correlative in these data sets. LLMs, transformer neural nets, are not that useful, and we have other AI methods that are more useful. On the other hand, we're finding LLMs are useful for automatically interpreting the metadata in data sets. So it's like you have a research paper someone published, there's some spreadsheet they put online, or it's tab separated data file which has the data in it. Usually the row and column headers are some incomprehensible abbreviations, and we can use the LLM to figure out these incomprehensible looking abbreviations, figure out what are the row and column headers in the data set someone put online, and then as a result you can automatically suck in a huge amount of online data sets in a way that makes explicit the linkage between them, right? So it's understanding the metadata of the data set. So in this research, then we're constructing a big like metadata set of all the publicly available biological and medical data sets. Now that's it only covers what's been studied, and it covers what's been put online openly, but that's in some domains it's a decent amount. Like there's a lot of gene expression studies of different tissues and people under different conditions. Pretty much every study that's funded by the US NIH has a rule they have to open up the data when they publish their research. Now, if they can make an excuse like this might compromise someone's privacy, then they only quasi open it up, and you have to be someone that they like to get access to it. So a lot of DNA data you can't actually get unless you work at some major university or something. But you can get a lot of clinical data studies. You can get gene expression studies. You get studies across organisms. So that, one thing we're going to do with this is just make a tool that allows anyone to easily access and analyze this data, right? But it's also interesting to me to use that to drive my own research, right? So then you have to know what questions to ask, right? So I know some questions I'm asking are, we have these long-lived flies. We can tell what makes them live longer than control flies. So then for each thing that makes long-lived flies live a long time, I can ask, like, is there evidence that this combination of genes is also varied in humans who live a long time, right? And then you can try to piece together evidence for or against hypotheses like that from combining a bunch of different data sources. But I'm wondering, for the sorts of work that you do, are there any questions you would ask of this massive compendium of available data sets? Because we're sort of looking at automating flexible cross data set analysis, right? Like you can look at published papers, but that's each guy analyze their own data set. What we can do now, we can munch all those data sets together, and sometimes that lets you answer different questions. But I see your focus is on just analyzing the data about one person, which is of course not there in the compendium of all the studies, because these are studies of other people who are not you, right? But I'm still wondering if there's any questions you would be interested to pose to this sort of system.
Yeah. So the age range is something to consider too, right? Is there centenarian metabolomic data, for example, right? But and there are studies that
not public. There's centenarian DNA data that is not public, but we have. We don't even have centenarian RNA, like gene expression data, let alone like methylation or something. We have DNA methylation data for 15,000 people, though, across a very wide range of ages, which is interesting, but not a lot of centenarians in there at this point.
So my interest would be, if you're able to parse out what a youthful DNA methylation or a combination of genes that are found in youth that predicts longevity, what interventions can impact that, right? Because if you win the genetic lottery, that's great. Most people didn't win the genetic lottery, right? So the big thing is on practicality. So, is there diet data? Is there track steps? Any intervention that could be potentially applied to, all right, if you have this combination of genes and you walk 5,000 steps, 8,000 steps, whatever it is, your risk of death goes down by whatever, so that'd be one way to look that I'd look at it. Wait,
Yeah. I mean,
Yep.
once you know what are the differences between short and long-lived people, yeah, you can then cross-correlate with all sorts of other databases to figure what interventions might work. And I did some work designing novel combinations of supplements that way before, because part of what machine learning will tell you is, okay, this gene is often upregulated, this is downregulated, and this is upregulated, and these three things in combination often occur for people who are healthy and long lived. So then it's like, okay, do you want to take a mix of substances that will affect things in this particular pattern of up and down regulation? And if these are patterns that are common to humans and animals, you can then try the supplements on mice or flies first and see if it does something, because then you can actually see if it impacts lifespan relatively tractably. Like a fly doesn't live very long.
But even in taking it a step further to humans, just even looking at the standard biomarker panels that I mentioned, like I said, these aren't crazy tests. Just does it impact the standard?
Yeah. So we did that for a couple of supplements we designed in that way. I mean, we found something that had a good impact on C-reactive protein levels. We found something else that impacted various biomarkers of longevity. We found something that impacted could actually, in many cases, roll back moderate to mild Alzheimer's. So I mean, and this past work was based on sort of in a by hand way doing cross data set analysis, whereas what we're looking at now is, can you do like automated, much larger scale cross data set analysis? So yeah, looking for combinations of therapeutics to try is definitely one interesting thing to look at. And then that feeds into personalized studies like you're saying, because and then the dosing may vary depending on the individual. Also, the dependencies with other things that you take could vary depending on the individual.
And you'll have a segment of the population who will just take the supplements that you come up with just based on the hope and won't do any testing, right? So the key for me, testing.
Right. We take so many supplements all the time without knowing if they're doing anything. That's
not me. Not
right.
me.
Hey,
that was one lesson I learned when we were designing.
The analysis process can be
supplements.
quite tedious, but it's important to look at all the data in order to get accurate results.
Yeah,
that's
one thing we found when designing these supplements, the guy who we hired to do the dosing for us, he was like, well, you probably want to add some green tea or something in here that will give people a buzz, so when they take the pill, they feel like they're getting something out of it,
working.
Right? Yeah. So we put a little Adderall in there. People thought it was awesome, right?
Oh, but
no, we didn't actually do that, but yeah.
No, but I do have supplements when I drink my Perfect Amino, which is a protein, somehow a calorie-less protein space age thing. I do feel it tingle, and I thought it was in my mind, but I do feel it tingle. But
is that a good thing though, right? I'll give you an example. So nicotinic acid, which is a form of niacin, that's the form of niacin.
You don't want to feel that, yeah.
Yeah, you get a flush, and the flush is vasodilation, right? So you would think that would be good. You get a potential blood pressure lowering, right? So I actually set my
too
blood
much of a good thing at that point, right?
That's exactly in my case. Objectively, I saw that with one of my epigenetic pace of aging markers went completely nuts, like 10 standard deviations away from my average. So I cut the dose by 10x. I don't really have that problem. But imagine if I thought, the flush, I feel it, it must be doing something, right? But wasn't good objectively. So.
Right. So let's ask some answer some questions that the audience has. The first one is a real quick one. Thoughts on fasting and the longest fast that you've done?
For Desdemona, it's been her whole life. Right?
Exactly. She never eats. That's how she keeps her figure. But
So
Michael?
I'm big on fasting, not just because personal belief, but what the published data is. Just using one example, mice that were calorie restricted, that had an extended fast for that calorie restriction, and that were eating in their normal circadian rhythm. So mice are nocturnal when they ate during their nocturnal phase, and when they fasted for the majority of the day, and when they were calorie restricted, that had the longest lifespan to relative to eating when it wasn't during the nocturnal phase, and when they had shorter fasting windows, but still CR. So for me, every day I try to have a relatively short eating window, which is pretty much a daily fast of up to 16 hours, maybe a little bit more, 18 hours per day, depending on the day. Longer fasts than that, I'm not a fan of. For me, personally, other people may be different. It starts to negatively affect my workouts, and my workouts are like the central. It's like it's the root of my approach for optimizing function and fitness. So if my workouts suffer because I'm hungry and I haven't eaten, that's not good. So for me,
how long do you work out each day, out of curiosity?
not each day, twice a week, 90-minute workout, full body, compound movements, like, a little bit of weightlifting, but also other stuff that's good for mobility, flexibility, calisthenics, taekwondo. I got a whole bunch of stuff in there.
Yeah.
Trying to be the kick-ass 80-year-old and beyond. But but
I like the sort of very thoughtful, but also not so extreme nature of your approach, though. I mean, I know Brian Johnson, who I knew when we both lived in DC, 17, 18 years ago or something. I mean, very thoughtful guy, very intelligent guy. He's put a lot of analysis into this. On the other hand, not many people are going to, even setting aside the money aspect, not many people are just going to devote so much of their cycles to prolonging their lifespan. I mean, not that it's stupid, of course, if you could live an extra 100 years.
If you're rich,
I mean,
yeah, and you can.
Well, but being rich is one point, but there are people who are doing a very good job, similar to what Brian Johnson is doing, spending much less money, but also putting in many hours each day on it, right? And I think what's nice about Michael's sort of direction he's gesturing in, and the type of protocol he's suggesting, is it's not as expensive by a couple orders of magnitude at least, and it's also not dominating your entire life, or like the whole purpose of your life is to become a self-optimized machine, right?
It is the whole focus of my life. But if just to make an analogy, if you saw Michael Jordan practicing 8 to 10 hours a day, for the average basketball player, they're probably like, "You're nuts. Why do you do that? There's something wrong with you." But it was Michael Jordan, right? I don't want to put myself in Michael Jordan category, but I live this 24/7. It's 100% my focus. Everything.
Well, but 3 hours a week of exercise is not that
fanatical,
not that much though. And I mean the amount of supplements you take is probably not 180 supplements like Ray Kurzweil was taking for a while.
I take 2.
What supplements do you take?
Levothyroxine. I was diagnosed with hypothyroidism in my 20s, clinical hypothyroidism, so I have to take it. And vitamin D. 4. Vitamin D in the winter, and then I've been taking 3 methylfolate. Methyl B12 to try to limit homocysteine. I may take that out though, so it'll be down to 2.
So you dropped the NMN after all, even though it boosted the NMN level in your blood. So you felt that wasn't it?
Not just NMN. I dropped nicotinic acid, which also raised my NAD at a far lower dose. And I've been trying to tweak my diet to try to get the same magnitude of an increase in NAD with adding stuff in the diet that has a potential for impacting NAD through certain pathways.
So is it working?
I sent blood for analysis. I'm going to send today. That's the second experiment I've got for this. But the first experiment, it didn't work. But the dose may not have been high enough. So, for example, there's trigonelline, which, whatever the name, it's converted into nicotinic acid. And it's found in things like chickpeas, lentils, peas, things that I usually don't eat. So I added chickpeas into the diet, sent blood for NAD analysis. I didn't get an NAD boost, but that was only 17 milligrams of trigonelline per day. So I recently increased the trigonelline dose through diet. Fenugreek seeds have a lot more trigonelline. So it was, 60 milligrams now, and 60 milligrams of nicotinic acid raised my NAD by almost double.
So you did NMN, but you didn't do like a SIRT6 activator or something then, which is...
No.
You think that's not useful?
I know that it extended lifespan in mice, but
yeah.
The centenarians don't have SNPs for SIRT6 or SIRT6. I'm not sold on it yet. But and also too, for me, it's do I have a designated need? Does the biomarker data suggest that I need to do something to fix it? So without doing anything in my diet, my NAD levels are generally age expected and lower relative to youth. In terms of SIRT6, what biomarkers would I even expect to be haywire if I wasn't activating it properly, right? If there's some pro-longevity pathway that I'm not hitting by including foods that could activate it, I'd expect to see it in glucose or lipids or kidney function. Pick your organ system, right? I'm looking at all of those things, and there's basically no record of it. So I do have deficits in methylation pathways, whether it's homocysteine or Horvat's epigenetic age. So I'm trying to expand my pool of methyl donors to potentially impact those pathways.
Interesting. So yeah, to rephrase my last point more accurately before I've got to go jump into something else, I think one thing I like about your methodology is one could largely follow the direction you're suggesting without having it dominate one's life. I mean, it may dominate your life because that's your profession. I don't want to dominate my life because I'm trying to build beneficial AGI and raise a bunch of little kids. I can't afford
You've got that dominating your life.
Yeah, I can't afford that, and I keep getting dragged into these podcasts. I mean, yeah. So I can't afford to have that dominate my life, but I'm certainly willing to put more more effort than I am now into health optimization. I mean, I do exercise regularly and eat a basically healthy diet. So I mean, I don't put zero effort into it either. But I think it's very valuable to have approaches like this that are tractable for people to follow without making it their life mission. I do. And I like the fact that you could do a lot with $35 a month of testing because I mean there's a lot of people who would be interested in this who can't afford to spend $5,000 a year, let alone Brian Johnson's.
I wonder if we can open source that
year,
testing though. It seems to me my hacker spine is tingling here, and it seems to me that there must be some kind of way.
Well, but it's not going to be cheaper. It's not going to be cheaper though. I mean,
in bulk, I would think if you were testing.
Well, but the testing.
A group of people were doing it at a hacker space, and they were doing their own testing.
I don't know, but I mean, commercial labs do it in bulk, right? I mean, commercial labs.
That's another way to save money, but the point is, there's different ways that maybe to save money on the testing.
There might be, but and I'm ignorant on this, but my gut feel is that $35 is pretty cheap for doing all these evaluations in a reliable way. So I mean,
It would be nice if people that don't have additional income could do it too. That's all I'm saying. It'd be something to look into.
But you gotta do these things carefully. It requires a lot of different reagents and stuff. I mean, I think for a more obscure test, which is expensive, probably there's a way to biohack it. It seems like these are done at very large scale and high reliability, and that cost is not really that high. I mean, I think I don't want to be insensitive because, of course, I mean, the average African farmer cannot afford it. And, of course, there are people in working class or on public assistance in U.S. for whom $35 a month is too much. But
our audience thinks $35 a month is fine.
There's a lot of people in the U.S. who, I mean, that's like 5 Starbucks frappuccinos a month.
I don't know how the number got so low though, because we were talking about a much larger number before, and also in terms of doing it, more than once a year. Like I dabbled in this because I got my CBC back right when we had our call last year. And I was looking at it, but there's still I don't have enough information as to what I'm even looking for in my
Well,
test.
that's a different point, though. But that I think could be solved in a lot of easy ways. I mean,
That's
by
the
this,
missing
but
piece
by this
for
point,
me.
you can make an app where you just scan that, and then it knows who you are and it tells you. And I mean, I'm sure Rejuve will integrate that into
We have
Rejuve
Rejuve
app
next
before
week too.
long,
They
right?
will be our guest
Right.
next week, Rejuve
So
Bio.
we can plug that into. You can make that feature in Rejuve app, but I mean, many people could make that feature to interpret the results. But I mean, I think it would be beneficial to make that available to people who are lower income, and then I can think of very good ways to do that. I mean, I think there's a bunch of organizations out there, including possibly Rejuve, that would subsidize a certain number of people doing these tests in exchange for them committing to do it regularly over a period of time, so that data would be there, right? And so I mean, I think this cost is low enough that it's getting near actually the economic value of having that data to feed to your machine learning algorithm. So I think there are ways to work that
That's a great idea.
as well, actually. But
Yeah, no, I like that. I
And
know
not-
Ben. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Ben
So
has to go. I just want to let him go, and then we get to keep going for a minute.
yeah, if Michael has a few more minutes, there's questions from the
Right. Right.
peanut
Are you
gallery or
are you
the
going to stick
macadamia
around,
nut gallery or whatever.
or are we
But
going to ask questions?
I've got to jump into another
Okay,
less
I just wanted
interesting
to make
call
sure
now. But
because
yeah,
sometimes you'll stick around anyway. I had to check. Okay, great. We're going to ask
But
questions
thanks
now.
a lot. Thanks a
Thank
lot,
you,
Michael.
Ben, and we'll see you next week when we'll have Rejuve Bio here. So that'll be great, and he's involved directly in that. Yeah, we got questions I want to make sure to get to because one of the things about this show is that we will wait to answer everybody's stay a little later if we need to answer everybody's questions, because one of the main points of us switching to this weekly format and a live format is to get the audience more involved. So the first question is from Haley, who some of you will talk to from time to time while you're in our chat, and she's wondering, and this is really funny because it made no sense to me when I read it, and then when I pasted it to Michael, he was like, "Oh yeah, totally." So I think it's really funny that it just shows how you're in the thing or you don't have no idea. Is it VO2 max and grip strength the highest correlation to low all-cause mortality? What the hell does that mean, Michael?
Yeah, that's the Peter Attia. That's a Peter Attia statement, which superficially is accurate. It's not inaccurate. Like I said, I'm pro-exercise, but there is another side of that, which is,
Wait, first of all, what is that? I have no idea what we're talking about.
Sure, VO2 max is basically your maximal ability to consume oxygen during an exercise test. So higher levels, better function, lower levels, worse function. And it declines during aging. And having a higher VO2 max, a higher ability to have a larger endurance capacity, exercise endurance capacity, is associated with lowest risk of all-cause mortality relative to people who have much lower. So that's a fact.
Is that what they find out when they do the stress test? When they give you a stress test?
Yep.
Okay.
That's one of the things. They're also looking for like arrhythmias and other, heart abnormalities.
Okay.
So that is true, but that comes with a limit, right? For me, the question is, what's the highest VO2 max that won't mess up other biomarkers? And in getting to that VO2 max, it involves how much exercise, right? So if I have to exercise 4 hours to get to my highest VO2 max, but I have other biomarkers that are messed up because of maybe I'm overtraining. I know for me, the 2 90-minute workouts a week is not overtraining because I track markers of overtraining, which are heart rate variability and resting heart rate, which are also cardiovascular markers. For me, if I go beyond those 2 workouts per week and include, more than the exercise of a certain intensity, like more than just light walking on the off days, these metrics go in the wrong directions and start to look aged. So whereas there is truth to you do want to optimize your VO2 max, I add some more nuance to it, which is, knowing the next exercise is a stressor, knowing that stressor is important for health and, potentially longevity, minimizing disease risk. what's the maximum amount of exercise where you can do where now you don't start to mess up other biomarkers. And in my opinion, there's no published data on this because there's just no published data for heart rate variability, resting heart rate, and longevity. There are age-related trends, but I haven't seen all-cause mortality data or even life expectancy data for that. But what is the maximum VO2 max and the amount of exercise that you can do that doesn't mess up other biomarkers? That's the nuance that I would add to that. My goal is to be 80, 90, 100 and beyond, and not necessarily have a VO2 max of 60. I'd be happy to have a VO2 max in the 40s, but knowing that my approach kept it in the 40s for the next 60 years by not overtraining and tracking the markers of overtraining. Whereas someone whose main goal is to have a VO2 max of 60 or whatever, or something you have to put in probably double or triple the amount of time I'm exercising. Again, does that mess up other biomarkers? What's the net effect?
Mm-hmm. All right. Great. We got another question for you from Haley. She's wondering about the metabolome and gut biome relationship with sarcopenia.
Yeah. So that's how I actually got my start in metabolomics, was by studying associations between stuff floating in the blood, metabolomics, with muscle mass and function. So we identified many gut bacteria derived metabolites that were associated with muscle mass and function. So we investigated that. We looked at cross-sectionally older people who have higher function versus lower function. Is their gut microbiome different? Which gut bacteria are different? And then that led into the next grant, which we're currently recruiting and enrolling. So if you're in the Boston area and you're over 65 and you want to eat a very high soluble fiber diet, the Mike diet, and you want to see if it impacts your muscle mass or function, come to Tufts and we'll see if you qualify. But can we positively impact the gut to positively impact muscle? And we're looking at some gut bacteria-derived metabolites as a part of the metabolome in blood as a part of that story. So that's not the whole story with the metabolome. There may be other metabolites that impact muscle mass coming from the gut, but that's bile-acids, for example. So that's the gist of that answer.
Okay, and how would we find out more? I mean, I guess we basically would need like just a list of the foods. When I looked up high fiber foods and a high fiber diet and a high soluble fiber diet specifically, the lists don't always match up. They sort of do generally, but not really. Is there a list that you have? Again, this is like the most basic, where do we find out what to eat so we can pick the stuff we like from the list and try to eat better?
Yeah. So I sent a link. It's a company. I'm not affiliated with them in any way. They have soluble fiber contents of like every food you can think of. And it's pretty close to the published literature, like on PubMed. I try to get the sources that they use to derive this list, but it's proprietary. I don't know where they got it from, but it's pretty close.
Okay.
Yeah. So
great.
Yeah.
I will put that in the YouTube description for this clip, so everybody will have that list.
But even without that, it's just non-starchy vegetables, more non-starchy vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, green leafy vegetables. These are things that are high in carrots, red bell peppers. These are things that are relatively high in soluble fiber per calorie.
Yeah.
Whole grains are still good in a different way. They've got plenty of fiber. Most of that is insoluble, but it's still whole grain may have positive impacts on the gut in other ways that go beyond soluble fiber. So a mix of both, but more heavily on the vegetable side. But again, it goes down to the biomarkers. Maybe you're someone who doesn't do well on fiber and, you get bad GI distress and, I wouldn't, it's not for everybody.
It depends. It depends.
I'm not an absolutist, and I'm not vegan either. For those who are going to say this vegan guy, I'm not vegan. I got
eat meat? You eat meat?
I eat fish every day, only because the biomarker said so. I went vegan for a year. The biomarker.
So you're just eating. It's just like more supplements to you. You're not really eating food to taste it or
no. Taste is a big part of my approach. For example, if you just give me ground flaxseed, it can taste like sawdust. If I eat, I can do it for a day or two, but ground flaxseed after 4 or 5 days without anything else in it, not so good.
You got to put it in your smoothie or whatever, right?
Yeah, yeah. Or I mix it with dates, a little bit of dates, a little bit of cardamom or cinnamon, and now I look forward to it every day, right? So, um,
What about
everything.
supplements? I have like the plant-based Huel that I like. That's good when I get stressed out and can't eat.
Hmm,
I can drink that and it makes me better, and it's very low, it's the plant-based one, not the
yeah,
other one. But what
sure.
about that kind of stuff? Just only when we have to, or
Uh,
what do you think?
It's all about the biomarkers. What do the biomarkers say? I can't imagine that it'd be better than whole food. For example, athletic greens is highly popularized, but when I looked at the ingredient list, it's like very little fiber. I mean, imagine if I took an apple and I dried 5 grams of it and I put it in a supplement and I mixed it with some, 5 grams of, some green vegetables, put it in a powder. And now you have 30 grams, with other stuff, 20 other grams of other stuff in there. And you had
Right.
30
And I
grams of
would be
this.
able to consume that because I'm never going to be able to eat all that food.
Yeah, but it's such a minuscule amount of nutrition relative to the
Oh,
real
you're
food.
saying, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. So that part's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why there's a very few of them that I'll use anymore. Actually, and a lot of them are crap too. You really have to read the ingredients. But you're saying if your body responds well to it, there's no reason why it couldn't be fine. That's
if
what I'm
it
hearing.
if it responds at all, like you'd have to actually have, I get the feel aspect, but you actually want to have some objective biomarkers that it's doing anything. Like, do any of them, does anything move, or maybe some of them moves in the wrong direction, right? So
Uh, okay. All right. We have one more question. Niall, our robot operator, is asking, have you looked at the impact of all day eating for extreme athletes like bodybuilders?
all the okay,
Yeah, I'll say it again. I'll say it
yeah.
again. Have you looked? Because it's a weird question. I had to read it twice myself. Have you looked at the impact of all day eating? And then as an example, he said for extreme athletes like bodybuilders. So
Yeah.
they'll eat all through the day because they're building the muscle.
See, I started on this journey, as a teenager, reading bodybuilding magazines, thinking, how could people who look so lean and fit and be so physically, functionally strong, right? How could they die ever? It didn't make sense to me. It didn't make sense how the most functional wouldn't live the longest. And anecdotally, again, you rarely see a centenarian that's a marathon runner or a bodybuilder. They're usually dead far beyond. The greatest example of that is Jack LaLanne, who, I mean, I don't know how old the audience is, and I'm dating my own age in this, but Jack LaLanne was a fitness icon in the 50s and
Yes,
60s, was training every
absolutely.
day and would say things like, I can't die, it'll be bad for my image. He thought he was never going to die because he was super fit and functional and lean, and died at 95. His brother died actually at 96 and didn't have that fitness lifestyle. So how much did it help? I don't know. But that goes back to,
He
uh,
looked great though.
he
He
did,
he,
for
he
sure.
died at 95. He did not look 95 when he
Uh,
died.
At 90, from 90 to 95, he did look 95. If you saw him walk, it was
Oh.
gait of an old person. But
Oh my God, he's 95 and he looked old. I mean, the rest of his life, though, he didn't age. There was a
yeah,
time when he kind of got to 40 or 45, and then you knew he was older. The time was passing, but it didn't look like it. He was still swimming at Alcatraz and doing all sorts of crazy shit. We're here in San Francisco, so Jack LaLanne was a staple here.
if you look at pictures online, him at 70 was still fantastic, like 50-year-old. So, but for me, getting to 90 and then having 5 years of decrepit life, no, I'm not interested in that. I don't want that to happen ever. So what if he tracked his bio? He died of pneumonia, which tells me that his immune system wasn't as good as it should have been, right? He didn't fight off I don't know if it was bacterial, viral, fungal, or whatever. But what if he was tracking his biomarkers over time? Would he have seen a pattern of overtraining in his data? Was he overtrained? He was juicing. Maybe the fiber didn't, he wasn't getting the fiber, and the fiber didn't optimize his gut
He was
microbiome.
juicing. What are you talking about?
Yeah, Jack
Jack
LaLanne.
LaLanne was juicing?
Yeah.
Doing
No, no, no.
steroids?
Not
No.
steroids. The Jack
Oh.
LaLanne, he had a juicer.
Oh,
That
a
was
juicer, a juicer.
Yeah.
You're gonna break my heart.
Oh, yeah.
My childhood idol.
Yeah.
No, okay. So
But
anyway, so I didn't mean to get you off on the Jacqueline
yeah,
subject. So all day eating and bodybuilders.
right. So the long story short is, can you have a healthy lifestyle? Can you live long if you're a bodybuilder and you're eating all day? What do your biomarkers say? You know, if your blood pressure is a little bit higher because you're a bodybuilder and you're carrying 50 pounds more muscle, is that going to be good for longevity, Alzheimer's, anything that's linked with blood pressure? I don't know, probably not, right? And it even goes to the point of, you know, you don't have to be CR, you don't have to be, 140 pounds like I am now, and you know, some amount of exercise. What is the optimal dose? Calories, exercise, you know, what is the optimal dose for health and longevity? And I don't want to say bodybuilders aren't going to live as long, but you know, it comes down to the biomarkers. If you've got good biomarkers and you're a bodybuilder and you're heavier than, you know, the average person, but it's lean and fit, I'd say, what do your biomarkers say? That'll lower your risk.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. This has been really interesting. And I'm going to try to I'm going to try to figure it out. And if I do figure it out, we'll have you back. Maybe we'll have you back anyway, in general, just to find out what you've been learning as time goes on. I like to check in with people that are doing long-term healthy things. I like to check back every year so that the audience can learn and we can follow you along with you as you figure things out. You're basically figuring stuff out so that we don't have to. And I'm trying to translate it so that the average person could maybe go give it a try. So we'll keep working on this and maybe do a blog post or something, you know, trying to explain it, linking directly to the videos you talked about and things like that. So if somebody's like, okay, I'm going to do it. I got my blood test, you know, I'm getting my blood test. I'm going to do this. I'm going to commit, you know, a half hour, a couple times a week to doing this. If you can't, because really more than a half hour, a couple times a week is going to be too much for a lot of people. But I've been amazed personally with what I've been able to get done this last year, just about focusing on it. But then I'm like you, I get robotic about it and I have to revisit. I've learned that I have to revisit more than I used to, because I'll just keep doing something and then I'll kind of look back and I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that wasn't working, but it was my new routine, you know, so there's that too. But that's why you're saying to retest and you're constantly adjusting and stuff like that. And that's a good system anyway, I think, for a lot of these health things, whatever you're doing, whether you're starting a new diet or doing whatever, you know, to go back and look. I remember when I first started, I'm eating a lot of keto, a lot of fat soluble stuff, or fat, using fat for your energy is the point of keto. And it raised because I was eating so many eggs, it raised my cholesterol. But then my doctor said, oh yeah, but you're losing weight. So like, don't worry about that, raising the cholesterol, because it's probably going to get better overall when you lose the weight. So I just got my new CBC test. So now I'm going to look. Now I can look, because it's been 6 months, you know, of that diet and eating very, very strict, you know, eggs and spinach and blueberries and you know, not a lot of stuff, not a lot of different stuff, which I'm told was bad too. You want to mix it up. So that's my last question for you, is that how do you deal with this whole thing of that it's good to mix it up if you have this diet that you're eating, that you're keeping track of to do your thing and your biomarker thing? Because that is the same, pretty much the same every day, even though you're adjusting it and doing biomarkers and stuff like that. How do you mix it up?
So I mix it up minimally, right? But so the long story short is, like, the approach in terms of the diet composition has evolved over time, and how much even of these certain foods used to be a lot higher or lower for, you know. So, but like I said, it's stuff I enjoy. Now, to the stuff you were talking about with keto and your cholesterol, I wouldn't just focus on that. I'd also look at, you know, immune cells like neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, because when your cholesterol went very high, your immune cells may have gone high. They may have still stayed in range, but if your neutrophils and monocytes went up and lymphocytes went down, that basically tells me that only going high fat and not including other stuff in your diet may not be the best for, you know, systemic health when considering the role of the immune system. So it goes back to that idea of what's the balance, right? That you could have relatively low levels and, you know, of neutrophils and monocytes, which increase during aging, and higher levels are associated with an increased all-cause mortality risk. So if that goes up on keto in conjunction with cholesterol, that's a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so what's the balance in terms of intake where you can keep your immune cells and their subdivisions youthful, with not having cholesterol levels too high, which potentially would increase your risk of cardiovascular disease. So it's about finding that happy medium. So, so wait, your question was about variety, basically, right?
Is it even true about the good to mix it up
So
kind of thing? If you've got a good regimen, then do you not need to mix it up? I guess is kind of what I'm asking.
Yeah. So the way I look at it is, when it comes to like growth for, say, a plant, right? And you know that it grows ideally under certain conditions, how much water, what's the pH, what's the nutrients, you're going to give it that to grow, to be the best, to bear fruit, right? And if you give it less than that, you know, nobody would say, okay, here's the composition that works best for that plant to grow. Just change it up once in a while. You know, if you have an experiment in the lab and you have, 100 grams of potassium chloride.
Okay, good. So that's bullshit. Good.
For me, it is. For the average person who trains, a lot of people do say that change it up, change your routine. I don't like that at all. You know, I like to know exactly. My workouts are standardized too in terms of sets, reps, movements. So I know if I'm actually losing function over time because I know exactly what I'm doing in every workout.
Yeah.
And even the effort involved in getting to a certain, so for example, if I'm not doing 12 pull-ups, and if it feels like there's more effort involved, I'm like, am I losing strength here? Do I need to try a little harder? What's going on? So now imagine if I changed it up and didn't do pull-ups for 6 months, but I'm doing other things that hit, back, biceps and back. And then I went back to it and I'm doing half as many pull-ups. Have I lost strength? Have I lost muscle? What's going on there? So there are too many variables to consider. For other people, if they want to do that and it works for them, that's great. That it doesn't work for me. Now,
if you get something that's working for you, you can stick to it and it's fine.
But objectively working based on objective biomarkers, and not just, metabolic health, glucose, triglycerides. What's the full spectrum? Can you get all of your organs? Brian said this before, where Brian Johnson has said where, I was doing things for me, but my liver and my kidneys and everything else didn't like it. And I started to listen to them to try to give them what they needed to be the best they could be too. So it's objectively as many organ systems as possible. And I didn't pick that up from him. I just like that quote. I've been doing this since 2015, way before him. So not that it's a comparison, but in terms of variety in the diet, I have an overall structure that keeps most of my biomarkers youthful. My most recent, Dr. Morgan Levine's has a biological age test that's based on 9 biomarkers. That's pretty good, based on correlations with chronological age and all-cause mortality risk. 17 years younger on that for my January 15th test. The maximum that you could reduce it is about 20 years. So the biomarkers and the diet are pretty good together. Now, like I said, I do have.
So wait, what did you just say? There's some other test that you could take that gives you an age.
Yeah.
And you did 17 less than you are? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's called PhenoAge. I can send you that link, and it's a download.
Yeah. I just want to make sure I understood correctly. Okay.
Yeah, and you just enter your blood test data. You do need high sensitivity C-reactive protein, so it's basically $80 test, not a $35 test. But you plug that in, and it's 9 biomarkers in your age, and it's a pretty good test. So, but in terms of the variety part, I have the overall structure that keeps most of my biomarkers youthful, and I don't want to blow up the system to fix a small subset of biomarkers, but I do want every organ system to be as youthful as possible. So it's about making small tweaks for me at this point without blowing up the bigger context. But when people first start, it's a different journey.
Okay. Well, I might hit you up if I try to explain how to do this to other people in the months to come, because I would like to, and people are interested. I've been talking to people about it, and it's sort of like, yeah, okay, but what do I really do? What would I really do? So I'm trying to get people to just let me know when they get their CBC done, and then I'm trying to figure out enough to be able to tell them, the 2 or 3 friends of mine that are actually doing it. Now I gotta know enough to be dangerous so I can help them interpret the results. And I imagine you have videos and things on that.
Yeah. So there are low-hanging fruit besides the videos. I was going to say, before the next time we catch up, I'm making videos weekly, sometimes twice a week on the whole journey and all the data and diet and everything. But Where was I going with this? Just lost my train of thought. Videos.
What do I tell people? Because people are going to get the CBC.
Lowest hanging fruit, right?
Yeah.
So I do think there are foundational aspects to this, which are making sure your sleep quality and duration is good, like at least 7 hours. And that's not just based on published literature, but some people may need a little more, a little less. I wouldn't try to get by on 4 hours sleep and coffee and caffeination all day. That can't be good long term. Regular exercise, consistently week to week, not, I'm doing it once a week and then, once a week, or I'm doing it 2 or 3 times a week and then I don't do it for 3 months. I don't think that's going to be good either, long term. And that's just for gross physiological function, not even to mention what it would do metabolically, the health benefits of regular exercise. But then also leanness, right? What's the optimal body composition that optimizes biomarkers, right? We see the published data like, okay, some studies show BMI of 22 to 24. Other studies in older adults show higher BMIs, 26 to 28. But that's probably very individualized too, where you can, by looking at many biomarkers and tracking your body weight, you can see, all right, is my biomarker, the net effect of my biomarkers better at a leaner body weight, or what is the ideal body weight for me? That goes beyond even the body composition aspect. So for me, those may be the 3 core foundational things. Now, adding on the diet part of it, the really specialized parts of how much of this and how much of that, okay. But getting the foundation right, I think a lot of people could benefit there. But then also too, if you do take that next leap into the diet stuff and really trying to hone in and specifically impact certain things, if you're going to track your diet, making sure that you at least get the RDA for all vitamins and minerals. Most people don't have a clue of what they're taking in and probably have multiple nutrient deficiencies that could affect the biomarkers and maybe even accelerate aging in some ways. So as a foundational starting point too, just making sure you're getting the basics for all vitamins and minerals, which does involve some aspect of tracking diet, right? But then even going beyond the RDA, just using vitamin K as an example, the RDA is around 100 micrograms per day. I'm currently at about 25x that just from diet, not for any published study, but because the net effect on my biomarker seems to be better. So start with the foundational stuff, get the basics in the diet, and then try to evolve your approach over time, which is, I didn't start off like this. It started off with the small stuff too. So.
Right. Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show. Desi, say goodbye, Desi. We're going to wrap up the show.
Goodbye. Please come talk with us again.
Thanks, Desi.
All right, everybody. We'll see everybody next week when Rejuve Bio will be our guests. We'll have Axel Shoemaker and Kennedy Shaw from Rejuve Bio. All right, everybody. Sweet dreams. Have a great day. Bye.